All right, let's take a look at 6.3. So the wording's going to look a little different because now we're looking at a point estimate for P. And so this is a proportion. And what we're going to do, we're going to call this P hat. So it has a little hat over it or an arrow above the P. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the number of successes, and I'll show you what that means in a problem in a minute, and we're going to divide that by the sample size n that we're used to doing. Now, sometimes we'll say successes, but it might not look like a success, but it's what we're looking for in that sample. And then we also have what we call Q hat. So P hat plus Q hat needs to equal 1. Therefore, if we have P hat, we can just take 1 minus P hat, and that's going to give us Q hat. We'll practice that in a minute. All right, so with this problem, it says in a survey of 1,550 US adults. So that means that's our N, 1,550. 1,054 said that they use the social media website Facebook. And so that's actually our success because that's what we're looking for. So when we come down here to find our point estimate, which is what they're asking for, we're going to take the number of successes over the sample size. So we're going to take 1,054 because that's our success. That's people who use Facebook. And we're going to put that over our sample size, 1,550. When we do that, we get 0.68. So that's our point estimate for P. Now, when we want to find Q hat, remember both of those have to sum to 1. So all we're going to do is take 1 minus P hat. So that's 1 minus the 0.68 that we found up here. And that gives us the 0.32. And sure enough, as a double check, if you add those two together, you would get 1. For the confidence interval, we're still going to use StatCrunch. We're going to use proportion stat this time, but you can see that it's set up the same way. We're going to have P hat plus or minus our margin of error. Now this time our margin of error looks a little odd. We will be doing that in the calculator. We'll still be using Z of C. We'll still be using the normal critical values, but under the or multiplied by times the critical value is going to be the square root of P hat times Q hat all divided by the sample size, and that is on your sheet. Okay, so this page just shows us those formulas again, but we do want to look at here about verifying. When we're using proportions, we do need to verify it's not going to be the sample size greater than or equal to 30. What we're going to do is we're going to take the sample size times P hat, that has to be greater than or equal to 5, and then we're going to take the sample size times Q hat, and that'll be greater than or equal to 5 also. So both of those have to be true in order for us to use the proportion stat. The rest of this is on your resource sheet. The P hat formula, the margin of error formula, and then of course looking at our confidence interval, although StatCrunch will take care of it for us. Okay, so this is using that Facebook data that we saw a couple slides ago. We found that P hat was 0.68. We found Q hat was 0.32. We knew that our sample size that was given to us was 1,550. And then our number of successes, which is X, was 1,054. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go to StatCrunch. We're going to go to Stat, then we're going to go to Proportion Stat, One Sample, and With Summary. That's also on your resource sheet. Let's look at the next slide and see what that looks like. All right, so once we get into proportion stats, The proportion stats wants the number of successes here. That was the 1,054 people who used Facebook. They want your sample size here. They call it the number of observations, but that's the 1,550. We're just like the rest of chapter 6, we're going to hit confidence interval and put in the 95% here, but as a decimal. Don't worry about this method. We're going to just stick with the standard. So as soon as you hit compute, you're going to get answers just like you did in 6.1 and 6.2. You've got your lower limit here of 0.657, your upper limit here of 0.703. And so if you want, you can see on a number line here what this would look like. The p hat would be in the middle, and then you would have each of your end points. All right, let's keep going. All right, so here's a new problem. We're looking at adults ages 18 to 29, and we're seeing where they get their news, whether it's online, television, radio, or print newspapers. So they tell us that we're going to talk to 800 people. That would be our sample size, right? Then it says construct a 99% confidence interval. That means that C is going to be 0.99. That's our confidence level. And then we need to see, we want to know who gets their news from television. So if we come here to television, we see that we have 27%. Now, StatCrunch doesn't want it as a percent or a decimal. They want the number of successes. So what we're going to do is take the sample size, we know that's 800, and we're going to multiply it times our p hat, which is 27%. And that gives us 216 people. That's going to be our success. Okay, so here's our work from the same problem. We have sample size of 800, P is 0.27 because that was 27%. To check if we can do this, we need to see Q. So Q is going to be 1 minus 0.27. That gives us 0.73. So if we added 0.27 and 0.73, we would get back to the 1. So let's go ahead and check here. First, we're going to take sample size times p hat, that's 0.27, and we get 216. That's definitely greater than 5. And then we're also going to check n times q hat. So we have 800 times 0.73, that's 584. That's definitely greater than 5. So both of these are good, and that means we can go ahead with the proportion stats. So we come into proportion stat one sample with summary. We're going to put our number of successes here, that's 216. Put our sample size here of 800. We want a confidence level of 0.99. And now when we hit compute, we're going to get our confidence interval here. So 0.23 is our end point to the left. 0.310 is the end point to the right. And so we are 99% confident that the population proportion is going to be somewhere in between the 0.230 and 0.310. All right, that's it for part 1.